Yeah.
Okay, so what was day to day in the signal?
Well, I went to art school for a year after I got out of high school, and I think
Where did you go?
New York City.
Okay.
I think that art background, when I got in the Army, and they looked at what I didn't have much else to offer. When they sent me to this signal outfit, I became the battalion draftsman for the headquarters company. And so I used to do road maps and things like that. Kept the battalion history and things. That was my job, battalion draftsman. When I went overseas, I became intelligence. The two of us became intelligence NCOs, as they called it, which we were supposed to, when they were concerned with subversive people in the military, we were supposed to, if we heard anybody say something that was anti-American or whatever, we were supposed to report it. But that was our job, as the intelligence NCOs. In addition,
Okay.
nobody knew about it except one officer in the company, in the battalion.
And you reported directly to him, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think he was my boss anyway.
Okay.
Greatest guy I think I've ever worked for.
What was his name?
Dana Prescott.
Okay.
And he was a Dartmouth football player in the 30s. Great, wonderful man. And he stayed in the Army afterward. Bigger Army. Great person.
And so why did you not go back to art school? Why did you kind of do the shift to
Well, I
engineering
was in the
after?
Signal Corps. I took an interest in engineering. And my oldest brother also was an engineer. But I decided I wanted to go to engineering school.
Okay. You thought the job prospects would be better, or what was the?
I thought about it that way.
Okay, yeah.
That's what I wanted to do.
Okay. And your military service kind of keyed you into that, something you were kind of interested in. Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting, all the electrical work we did, the putting up pole lines and teletype and telephone and radio and all that stuff. It was very interesting.
Can you tell me a little more about the Battle of the Bulge? Just kind of interested in the details of where you were during that battle. And
Well, for the first 8 days, we were where would be the western end of the Bulge. It hadn't quite reached us, except one night when we moved from this one town just across the river to another town called Wexler. I was coming off guard duty, and a couple other guys and a German plane came down the road around midnight and kind of strafed the road. That was probably the only time we'd ever been fired upon. We never fired on anybody, but I was telling you earlier that we were setting up this Christmas party, and one of the men I was working with, I forget it, Joe Olenchek, he was from New York City, and he did artwork for the theaters, for their shows on Times Square, and we had it all set up for the Christmas Eve party, but we left. And the people, the kids and the families were devastated. Fortunately, the Germans never got into town. They got across the river, and that's as far as they got. So when we went back to France, we were in a French army camp with one regiment of the 82nd Airborne Division. The other two regiments were up in the Bulge fighting. And we were there for a month. We didn't do anything much, just getting ready for the armies to clean up that area so we could go back. Except we used to go into Rheims, which was pretty close to buy wine.
Okay.
Champagne. It's very cheap. We drank more champagne and wine than we did water.
And did you help arrange some of that for the Christmas party? Was that part of your?
Yeah. Joe and I were the guys that were setting up the party.
And you recently went to I guess it's been several years. You went to the World War II Memorial in D.C.
Washington,
yeah, and saw Bob Dole. Is that correct?
I saw Bob Dole.
Yeah, and talked with him.
And I was also to the World War Museum in New Orleans when we went to a wedding of Jane's friend probably 10, 12 years ago. That was interesting. They've expanded it a lot.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm a charter member of the one in New Orleans.
In New Orleans, okay.
Yeah. But we had an interesting visit with Bob Dole. Our guide was a very interesting guy. It was quite accidental. We went up to the ticket booth. Rob and I went up there to buy tickets. And this fellow said to Rob, he said, "Is your father a veteran?" And Rob said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh," he said, "I'm coming off duty. I'll guide you around," because most of the people just went on their own. So he took us on a tour of the World War II Museum, and he said, "There's one place very few people get to, because they don't know about it." So he took us around the back, and there's one little area. He said, "Have you heard of Kilroy? In the Army, Kilroy was here." There's one little area behind some concrete where they got a memorial to Kilroy.
Okay.
So he showed us Kilroy. Then we were leaving, and he said, "Oh, I think Bob Dole comes here occasionally. Let me see if he's here today." So we walked down. He was in his wheelchair, and so he introduced us to him. The whole family. We sat around and we talked probably for a half hour with him. So he asked me how old I was, and that was what, 2 years ago. I probably said 91, and he was 92. He said, "Oh, Jesus, you're a young kid yet." Great guy. And I found out later, and I didn't think about it then. When I was in the Army in California, we were on maneuvers in the mountains between Monterey and Los Angeles and southern part along the coast with two mountain divisions. And Bob Dole was a private in one of the mountain divisions at the time. We were supplying signal communications to both sides. And we lived near a place called the Hearst Ranch. Not the big one that's so famous out there, but the one a little bit further north.
Okay.
But he was a nice, always liked Bob Dole, but he was very, very friendly, very outspoken, and enjoyed the family. They all had a nice time with him.
I bet that was really nice.
Yeah,
Can you go into a little more detail about Kilroy and just explain it?
I'm not sure I can explain it right. Kilroy was a fantasy character. And sometimes at the end of our letters, if there's something strange happening, you say, "Kilroy was here."
Kilroy was
So
here.
you draw a line with a head and a big nose and two eyes, and that's Kilroy. And sometimes at the end of the letters we would say, "Oh, Kilroy was here." Well, Kilroy was here all over the service, but it's in that one little spot at that World War II memorial. It's in the back that most people don't get to, but he took us. This fellow took us to it, and he explained a lot more about the different memorials, the different battles, and things of that nature. I've also been to the World War II memorial in Honolulu, to the Punch Bowl out there. And I have visited 4 or 5 military cemeteries in the Philippines, a couple in Belgium, I don't know where else, Korea.
Were
I
there,
was trying to make my business, when I was there on business, to take a weekend, if I had the weekend free, if there was one nearby, to go visit.
yeah, I went to one in Sydney, and somebody actually came up and gave us a little pen and said, "Thank you." And it's like, I didn't have anything to do with it, but it was just nice, the kind of gesture.
Oh, I went to one in Thailand, I think, also. One weekend.
That's nice.
Where they were Americans, British, and some others there. Near the, not too far from the prison camp, the River Kwai.
Oh, yes. Were there other events that, to you, sometimes you recall that were, humorous or unusual or typical that you kind of think of? And
Well, it wasn't so humorous, it was interesting. when I was in Paris, when I was in the Army, I went there on leave, a 3-day leave, and it was at night, and I was on the subway, the Paris subway, and this man came up to me, elderly man, and he said, "Are you Jewish?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Have you ever been to the Jewish quarter here?" "No." This is like 9 o'clock at night. He said, "Come on with me, I'll take you there." That's the last I remember of that. I don't remember going there with him. I don't remember where I went when I came back. Just that little incident with him that asking me if I would go with him.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a few of those. I forget some parts of it.
But his intention was just to kind of show you just the Jewish quarter and
Yeah,
give you
for
some.
his part.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was because it was a historical part of Paris.
Mm-hmm.
It still is, but not quite the same now. But Jane and I went there, and it was very interesting. They have a museum there. They have a Picasso exhibit nearby that Jane and I went to. He was a real loony in his later years. But any other interesting...
Where else did you go when you were on leave? So you went to Paris for a few days. What other places? And how was Paris at that time, by the way? Was it... It was completely liberated and...
Oh, yeah. It was probably in April of 45.
Okay.
I went to... My brother was in Luxembourg when I was in France, in Belgium. And because I was in the Signal Corps, I was privileged to look at some very secret maps, telephone maps. So I knew where he was and I knew his outfit. So I called him, and we were about like 100 miles apart. Well, he said, "I'm coming up to Brussels in a couple of days to get the liquor rations for my officers." He said, "Could you get a 3-day pass?" And I said, "I'm sure I could," which I did. My company commander was very understanding. So my brother came into Houillet, picked me up, and we went up to Brussels. And I was a corporal living in the officers' quarters for 3 nights with him. We did some tours, and then he went out and picked up all his wine, and he brought it back down to drop me off, and so that was a nice 3 days with him. We have some pictures of it. Enjoyed that. Other than that, I had one, could have been a bad experience when I was in Germany. I was going to go back to Belgium. We used to have a messenger on a Jeep, go back to where we had been stationed 3 or 4 times a week. He'd go back, stay overnight, and come back again into Germany. So I made arrangements to go with him. And for some reason I couldn't go. I didn't go. Well, he went and didn't come back. For 3 or 4 days, we didn't know what happened to him. He was not in my company, he was in one of the other companies. So some troops found him in his Jeep, wrecked in the forest and dead. Whether he had an accident or whether somebody killed him, we never found out. But I was supposed to be on that ride with him.
Wow.
Good thing you didn't go.
So that was, when I was in southern France, in Marseille, waiting to go to the Pacific, we went to see Jerry Colonna and Bob Hope in one of their USO shows, which I have a picture of.
How were the people in France and other places you went after kind of the liberation?
They were very friendly. And I had some advantage because I spoke French.
Oh, okay.
See, I could get along okay that way. But they were in this town that we were in Belgium, we spoke French. I mean, we were like gods, you know. The mother of the family that I stayed with, they had 3 children, Ernest, Mimi, and Leon. Ernest was 18, I think. Mimi was 15 and 16, and Leon was maybe 12.
And how old were you at that point?
19 or 20, I think.
Okay.
The mother, Mama, was like my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Every night, and we used to eat at the mess hall. I roomed with them, with one of the medics from Louisville. They had, well, we stayed with me in a small house. When I look back at what they did to give us, I had a little room, and Camp King had a little room. And there was only one or two little rooms left for a mother, the father, and 3 children. And in the early days, the grandfather. But they put up with it. Which story was I going to tell you about being with them? The mother was like my mother. She really was. At night we'd come home from dinner, and Mama would say to Camp King, the medic, "What did you have for dinner tonight?" in French, and I would translate. If she didn't think it was enough, she would cook us up some eggs and ham and stuff like that. So she knew that we had enough to eat.
So they had they had animals and a garden and.
They didn't have animals, but the father had up on the hill outside. He had a plot of ground, and they grew vegetables. I don't know where he got his the eggs from, probably from a neighbor. But the people thought we were gods. I mean, they loved us, and
People thought you were what?
like gods.
Like gods, oh.
To this day, when I come back, I've been back since. Oh, when I was there 5 years ago for 50th wedding anniversary. The people that were there then are very excited when they see me.
So the 3 children still alive?
Still alive.
All 3?
All 3. One still lives in that town.
Okay.
Mimi, the daughter, lives there now. She married a career Belgian Army officer, so she lived in Germany for a number of years. She came back in this little house that she still lives in, which her grandparents lived in the late 1800s. She's in it now. Ernest, the oldest son, is about 10 miles south in another little town. They're all living. Big family of great-grandchildren now and grandchildren. But they're like family to me. All of my family have been there, and Mimi's been here, her daughter's been here, and her husband's been here. The rest of the family hasn't been here.
They came to see you in Atlanta?
In Atlanta, yeah. They came here, so when Mimi and her husband came, we took them to New York and Washington and Atlanta, Huntsville. They had a nice time. When we left New York, Renee said to me, he said, "You know those signs that say I love New York?" He said, "They ought to make one special for you." Says, "I hate New York." Because he knew that New York was not a very popular place to do. That's like over 20 years ago now. Oh no, yeah, it's over 20 years. Before the tornado, maybe he was here again. His wife was here the November after our tornado to visit for a little while. He had died just a few months before.
So when you went back, did it feel like a lifetime ago, or it felt like yesterday?
Natural.
Yeah.
It's such a small town. I feel it was like my home. You know, I knew some of the people. I could walk through the town at night and know exactly where I was. Small town, 800 people. Didn't take a lot of space. They had me one weekend when I used to go to Europe on business. I'd always stop there on the weekend before I headed home. And so one weekend, the younger son said, "Come with me. We're having a soccer match against some other town." He said, "You're going to drop the ceremonial first ball." I said, "Okay." So I dropped the ceremonial.
Oh, that's really
and then
neat.
I got out of the way.
Really that's really neat. They appreciated the
Yeah, it's nice. Nice people.
So did they sustain much damage during that particular town, or that
None.
was pretty okay?
None, except the bridge.
Okay.
the British troops blew the bridge. It was rebuilt with a military type bridge later, later in that year.
So their housing you was just their contribution kind of to the resistance, or was was there any kind of official decree that everyone's going to do this, or was it kind of case by case?
When we got there the first time, which was right after Thanksgiving of '44, we were supposed to, we were two companies. One other company went to another town. Two companies were going to go out in the, it's big open land, and take some land and put up tents and live there. And the mayor of the town came to our colonel and he said, "Colonel, you can't do this. The men can't sleep in tents. All the people here, each one will take 1, 2, or 3, depending on the size of their house, to sleep with them." And there was a chateau up on the hill, and the colonel said, "It's a problem for me from a security standpoint, because we were setting our communications up in the chateau." And he said, "I got to be able to keep my guys together." The mayor says, "Not important. We'll work it out. But all of them have got to come live with the families." So we never went into a field. That very first night, I was with a different family for the first 3 weeks until the end of the bulge. We went back to France. I came back to Huy, and then I went with this family and stayed with them until end of January to early April. There was another funny incident. The two older kids were playing ball in front of the house, and I was sitting in a chair, propped back against the wall, reading a French newspaper. And this very elderly lady comes walking by, and she looks at me. She walks a little bit. She looks at me. She starts laughing, chuckling a little bit. Goes a little further. She chuckles a little bit, and the daughter Mimi says, "What are you laughing about?" She said, "I'm laughing at that American soldier trying to read a French newspaper." So she says, "He reads it fluently. He can read everything that's in that paper." Which surprised her.
That'd be pretty difficult if you were just staring at a foreign paper,
Right.
trying to guess what the words mean.
I was pretty good then. I'm not very good now.
And that was from high school that you learned French?
Yeah, 2 years of high school.
Okay. And nothing aside from the high school? Because that's pretty impressive if you were that fluent with
We had a French teacher. I was telling one of the ladies at Hammond Glen the other day, who came from Beaufort, South Carolina. Who came from Beaufort, South Carolina, to Carteret, New Jersey. What she did up there, I don't know how, with her father and family. And she had a southern accent, real southern. And we learned our French with a southern accent.
Yeah.
But she was good. And I got out of high school in '41. I wasn't in Huy again until '44. There was a 3-year period. I didn't have much need for my French. But once I started using it over there, it started coming back. And in the 3 or 4 months that I was there, by the time we left, I was doing really well. Mostly speaking. The reading was a little bit more difficult. But to this day, when we took our tour of France alone, and her French was mediocre, but it was okay, right? We got along fine. We get stuck sometime, but we did most of our talking in French.
Yeah, I took 4 years of French.
That's great.
No, for some reason, it was really, she was good. And I learned it really well.
When you got out, was the GI Bill
Yes.
in effect for you?
Yeah.
So that covered your UVA?
Right.
Okay. Was that a pretty effective practice to be able to get that, and it covered most of your expenses?
Covered everything.
Okay.
Covered everything. Only thing that cost me money was getting from New Jersey to Charlottesville and back on the train. And I think we got a housing allowance. Did we? No. There was only books, tuition, and stuff like that. It was all in the educational part. They didn't pay our rent or anything like that, so we paid our own rent. But it made a big difference.
Yeah, I would imagine that was a pretty good benefit to be able to utilize that. What made you choose UVA?
Well,
You got a lot of
I was
exercise.
still in the Army, and I knew I was getting out, so I sent out applications to, it was probably in December of 45, yeah, to a bunch of schools. And, three schools. I sent it to, I was gonna go to Colgate with one of the guys in the outfit with me. He went to Indiana University,